Welcome back to your favorite show of the week. And that, of course, is Inside the Tape, brought to you by the Inside the Birds Network. I'm with my co-host here, Greg Cosell, the man, the myth, the legend, the guy that watches more film, more tape than anyone in the business. And I'm not just talking about the media business. I'm talking about the football business. I'm talking about coaches, players, too. This guy watches more tape than anybody. And, of course, myself, Clay Harbor, former Philadelphia Eagles tight end, number 82 on the field, number 1 in your heart. Without further delay, we got a lot to get into today because the Eagles are coming off of a huge win in dramatic fashion against the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. And obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about this okay-sized game coming up next week with the 49ers coming into Lincoln Financial Field to play our Philadelphia Eagles. Big game would be an understatement. But as we always start, we're going to start the same way today. And I got to ask our man, Greg Cosell, the man that watches more film than anybody. Greg, when you turned on the tape after watching that riveting Buffalo Bills game, I mean, I was sweating. Thought, no way they're going to come back and win this game after halftime. I'm disappointed. I'm already eating my feelings. I think I put in some extra food. What did you see when you turned on the film? What happened? Tell us your general overview when you first watched the film.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the game too. Rarely do I watch a game truly live on television because I usually watch the red zone. But this game, I watched most of it on TV. So I had a feel for the flow of the game as well as it was happening live, Clay. And that's obviously a different feel, as you know, than just watching it on tape. Yeah. And, then I put on the tape, and particularly with the Eagles offense, they really struggled. I mean, it was a tough go for a good part of the game. And then I start the third quarter, and on the first play of the third quarter, they call a basic slant flat combination, and Jalen, for whatever reason, just went brain dead. He didn't see it at all, and he ends up getting sacked. And I'm thinking to myself, he's just having one of those games where he's just not seeing it.
I remember think that was an RPO, though, wasn't it?
It might have been, but it was slant flat. It was slant flat. Yeah. And I remember, I worked, and he's a good friend of mine, Ron Jaworski, for years, and he would always tell me there's 2 games a year where, for whatever reason, you just don't see things the way you're supposed to. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is just that game where, he's not going to see it. And then they started the second possession of the third quarter, and the first play was the swift 36-yard run. And then I said to myself, okay. And by the way, that run, and I'm sure, you remember it, that was so beautifully blocked. It was basically an outside zone run to the boundary.
Yeah.
And because the Bills are a predominant over front, which means that they shift their defensive line to the strength of the formation, the tight end side, they ran to the weak side, the boundary, and it's essentially outside zone, but because of the front, they did the little fold block, where Dickerson, the left guard, blocks down, and where Kelsey folds around him and he gets to the second level. And then Juergens was unbelievable getting the backside linebacker. He looked like a running back getting up to him. I mean, and that play kind of, I think, got everything going. And by the way, I thought that drive by Brian Johnson, the way he called it, was brilliant. Because the very next play was the exact same call, and it would have broken if Driscoll was able to hold his block on Oliver for just a hair longer. But then the way he played off the little pass to Stoll and then the touchdown to Brown was the same play, basically. I thought that drive was brilliant. And that's the drive that really got them into the game offensively. And from there, you started to see the positive things in their offense.
No, absolutely. And I'll say, as a player watching that game, same thing like you, I watch it live and then you go back and watch the tape. And it's always funny when you watch a game on tape because none of that emotion, the atmosphere, none of that is in there on the tape. It's just all the technical stuff. And when you look at it, that's how you break it down as a player. I used to love coming in and watch the tape because it was just football. And you realize after watching the tape for so long, that outside stuff doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. And the greats don't let it matter. And you got a guy like Jalen Hurts who just doesn't get affected by no matter what the circumstances. And he's playing terrible. I remember tweeting out, like, Jalen Hurts has to get it together. He's leaving the pocket early. He's inaccurate. He's late on throws. He's just not looking good. He's not making the right decisions on the zone read, the RPOs. This wasn't looking like Jalen Hurts. But his demeanor, you look at him when they hit that game-tying field goal to go to overtime, he doesn't even crack a smile. This guy is just stoic. He just doesn't care. He is still focused on what has to happen. And when your leader, your team, your quarterback is like that, that just says something to you. And you are ready to go and ready for any scenario. And no matter how far back we are, no matter what's been happening, we just got to focus on what's ahead of us. And that's Hurts mentality, and that's Eagles mentality. And that game, I'll be honest, Greg, I'm playing that game. I don't want to be out there at first. It's cold. It's rainy. It's a little windy. That ball's slick. The ball's hard. As an offensive player, like, man, how many of these games do we have to play? I want a 50 degrees game, no wind, that we can throw the football, not have to worry about. But the Eagles came back in the second half and they moved the ball. I thought that was great, and that shows how resilient this offense is. You're missing Dallas Goedert and Lane Johnson. First play of the day, Jack Driscoll gets beat.
Yeah.
I go, oh boy, this is going to be a long game. But he sucked it up and he played a solid game. I didn't think that he got picked on too much. He's not Lane Johnson, but he did his job. That was impressive. Jack Stoll had that big catch. I mean, he didn't do much. He held up okay in the blocking game. But those are two big-time players you missed. And I thought missing those guys, being down the way you were, playing through these elements, that the Eagles showed a lot of heart and a lot of resilience. And I know we keep using those words, but overall, I thought that was great. So talking about our quarterback, Greg, obviously, we've said a couple things. We're talking about that first play of the second half when maybe it's an RPO. Hurts is about to throw the slant flat. The slant looks open to A.J. Brown. Looks like an easy read. But what are you hesitating on? What were your thoughts on Hurts' performance this game?
It was up and down, clearly. Obviously he did not have a very good first half. It's funny. You mentioned the first play of the game. And, I think with Jalen Hurts, and obviously he's a very, very good player. That's not the point. But there are different kinds of quarterbacks, and you can be very good in different kinds of ways, Clay, as you well know. But even that first play of the game, he did have Brown wide open on the inbreaker, and I thought he could have made the throw. Some might disagree, but he just perceived that pressure from his front side. It kind of became a factor more so after he broke down. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe it's going to be one of those games where he's going to leave the pocket a little early and he's going to end up trying to extend plays and make off-schedule plays, which obviously he's really, really good at. But no, they struggled in the first half. There was no rhythm to their offense whatsoever. And then, the thing about Jalen is he can make special plays, and then you get to the second half, and obviously the running game is not him per se, it's the runs, but obviously the touchdown to Zaccheaus was a truly special play where he ran out to his left and kind of pointed to Zaccheaus, and Zaccheaus then got on top of Hyde, and there wasn't a lot of room there, Clay, as you know. That was an unbelievably great throw and a really good catch from someone who's not a big guy who had to go up and get it. So that kind of play, that was a huge play. And then it just seemed like they got into a little bit of a rhythm too in the passing game. It wasn't a big numbers game for Jalen Hurts. I think he threw for about 200 yards. It wasn't a big game in that regard, but they just seemed to and I hate to say this as someone who watches tape, because I don't know exactly what this stuff means because I'm not on the field playing, but it just seemed like they made a few plays when they needed to make a few plays. And I guess that's true in every sport. But, for someone like me who watches tape, that's a hard concept for me to get my head around, because it's not necessarily a tactical thing. It's just, games, even though you're trying to keep the emotion out of it as a player, there is an emotion to it, obviously, in football. And, I'm sure when you're playing as you did, and I didn't, you can feel it. And even though you're trying to keep your head in the game and the coaches are just coaching you to do your job, you can feel it, particularly in that stadium too.
Yeah, definitely. It's about keeping those emotions in check and playing. Some guys, I mean, you got different guys that obviously play well in different ways. And obviously Jalen's one of those guys that have that calm demeanor. There'd be guys in the locker room that'd be bashing their head against a wall. Some guys listen to rock, rap music. Some guys are listening to country music. However, got people just throughout my experience, different ways to play, different ways for them to get in that zone where they felt like they played their best football. And, to kind of piggyback off what you're saying about that point, I thought that they did make plays. And a couple of guys that I thought stood out on the offensive side of the ball, obviously, we got Devontae Smith and DeAndre Swift again, as far as the playmakers. And if like I said, I'm blocking for Swift. I love blocking for this guy because I know he's going to hit the hole. He can break some tackles. He's going to run hard. And he's a guy that you just want on your team. Zacchaeus obviously came up with that big play. A.J. Brown didn't have a big game, but he scored a touchdown when it mattered. So I still think the Eagles playmakers showed up. And then to look at the defensive side of the ball, Greg, I think that they got a couple of D linemen that are going to be watching Jordan Davis. And obviously, Jordan Davis, and then you go with Jalen Carter as well. But those two guys, man, they are going to be studs for a long time. Jordan Davis was very impressive. End of the game, got some big tackles down that final drive to hold him to a field goal. Jalen Carter had a couple missed tackles, but huge block field goal. Well, I mean, both these guys were showing up on tape. Defensively, when you turned on the film, who stood out to you to the Eagles?
Well, overall, I thought they had a tough time. I mean, they gave up over 500 yards. Josh Allen himself had over 400 yards. I mean, Josh Allen played a great football game.
He did. He did.
And it was tough sledding for a while in that game, through most of the game, quite honestly. The interesting thing, and we'll get to the next opponent because it could be a factor, but the Bills ran 92 offensive plays. Jalen Carter played 76 defensive snaps. Jordan Davis played 62. Now, I thought Jordan Davis, there was a stretch in the fourth quarter, the Bills' final touchdown drive, I believe, where Davis looked totally winded. And then he came back in overtime and made 3 great plays in the run game. That was super impressive. And then, of course, running down Josh Allen, even though he didn't tackle him, that was really impressive because ultimately he did not allow Allen to turn the corner. And who knows what would have happened if Allen had been able to turn the corner. Who knows? Maybe he scores. Who knows? But the point is Davis was phenomenal on 3 running plays in overtime when it looked like he was just totally worn out at the end of regulation. But, as I said, playing that many snaps, you wonder if there's going to be a residual effect this week when they play a 49ers team that lines up and plays physical football and runs the ball, because that's an awful lot of snaps.
Yeah, and the thing is that the 49ers are coming off of what we like to call that mini bye.
That's right. Yeah.
They played on Thursday, so they're resting up. They're watching the Eagles play. And then the Eagles are playing, Sunday, the afternoon game. They're just eating popcorn on the couch, watching it. So that helps. Obviously, they're traveling from the West Coast, but they haven't played that little extra helps. The Cowboys, when they play the Eagles, are going to be coming off of a mini bye as well. That helps. To me, it's a tough, break when you come to the schedule too.
Yeah, and the Eagles had issues on third down in this game. They could not get off the field on third and long, too. I mean, it's one thing not to get off the field on 3rd and 1 or 2, but, I mean, the Bills were 13 for 22 on third down conversions, which is really not good at all.
Wasn't it like 11 of 18 on 3rd and long, too?
Yeah, and Allen was 9 for 14 for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns, and 8 of his 9 completions resulted in first downs. They couldn't sack him. He was only sacked 1 time, and it was big by Brandon Graham. And he also had 4 runs for 49 yards and a touchdown on 3rd down. He had a special game, Josh Allen. He's that kind of player. He can do that any given week. But yeah, they really struggled on 3rd down. Let me ask you on that final pass that was incomplete, the one to Davis where they went 0.
Yeah.
I've always been taught, and maybe you've been taught differently. I've always been taught that when it's 0, you take the middle as a receiver. But, again, I don't know if they teach it differently. I don't know how they, but I've always been taught that by coaches, that when it's 0 and there's nobody in the middle of the field, you take the middle.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a case to be made for both players because, Davis runs the correct route. It's obviously a corner route. That's a call. But you see the pressure and you see you're so open, that whole middle of the field's open. You take that. You play football. Yeah. So I think both of them have a case there in a court of law. Maybe you can't convict Davis. You can't send him away because he's like, hey, I had a corner route, but you're a football player. You see the pressure coming. Huge point in the game. Middle of the field opens up. You got to take the middle there. And I'm thankful he didn't. But yeah, absolutely, Greg. I think that's something that as football players.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was always taught by coaches, that, hey, when there's no one in the middle, someone's got to take the middle. And obviously that's where Josh threw the ball. And because it's funny that watching that live, it was one of those plays that you're watching live, and then all of a sudden everything slows down. Because as I'm watching it live, I'm thinking, okay, game's over, Eagles lose. And then I see the ball hit the ground, and it's like, oh my God, how did that happen?
Yeah, no, that was definitely a luck. And then what are your take on some of these, missed calls? You hear a lot of people talking about them. Eagles got lucky, and obviously there was a couple interferences here and there. The horse collar maybe that did or didn't get called. What are your take on some of these supposed penalties, Greg?
Yeah, you know what, Clay? I'm not one of those guys. I don't deal with the penalties.
It evens out at the end, right?
Yeah, I never did when I played. I didn't play football. I played basketball. I never did when I played. Because I can't control that. I mean, fans react emotionally, as they should. That's what fans are, and that's why they love the sport and we love the fans, because they love the game and it's great. But I've never been one to, get all excited one way or the other about that. Do I have an opinion on certain? Of course I do. I'm seeing it, but it doesn't change my feeling about the game.
Absolutely. And then they're going to act like, some of these fans act like they didn't catch a break either with the Nicholas Morrow, roughing the passer. That's not roughing the passer in flag football. Come on. But, to put a bow on this thing, I thought the Eagles, obviously, they played well in the second half. They got to clean up the first half because, down the stretch, when you get in the playoffs, you don't get a second shot at this. And if you get down to a good core, obviously this is a good quarterback, but more often than not, with that time of possession, with that team that you played there, you're not going to be able to make that comeback. The Eagles have done it over and over again, but you're going to have to execute better in the first half moving forward. Obviously, you got the 49ers coming in, and the Eagles are not even the favorite here. They are actually the underdog.
Are they the underdog this week?
Yeah, they are underdog in this game.
That makes no sense to me. Look, say what you want, and look, it's up to the coaches to nitpick. That's what coaches do. You know that. You played in the league. That's what coaches do. No matter whether you win or lose, there's things to work on, to go over. They do it dispassionately. The previous game, once you hit past that 24-hour mark or whatever the coaching staff believes in, that game is over, and now you're correcting mistakes and working on the next game, as you well know. But yeah, they're still 10-1. They still have the best record in the NFL. They win football games.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree, Greg. It's pretty frustrating. And something else that is frustrating to me is buying tickets. And, sometimes you go on these sites and you're overpaying for tickets. They don't have the tickets together. You're not sure you're getting the best deal. It's last minute, so you can't get the last minute tickets. But Game Time, gametime.co, not com, gametime.co has the best last minute tickets for all the big events. And me personally, I remember I was trying to go to a Bulls game. I'm local in Chicago, and last minute, me and my girlfriend were looking for tickets, and I wanted to take her. It was actually her first Bulls game. She wanted to go, and I said, let's get some tickets. So I looked at Game Time, and I didn't have to worry about it. I wanted to show her a good time about not getting good seats, because Game Time shows you exactly where you're gonna sit. They have flash deals. They have zone deals. It's easy to find and buy tickets for any kind of event in your area. You get views from your seats. The lowest prices guaranteed. Event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. And Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You get to see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive, and all-in prices to show your total up front, Greg. I hate when I see the tickets $100, but then I go to check out, it's 200. Wait a second. You said this thing was 100. Now it's 200. They have all-in pricing, so you don't have to worry about that. And they're obsessed with finding you ways to save money. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. And even an hour after the event starts, Greg, if you're sitting at home, the game comes on TV, you realize you want to drive down to the link and watch the Eagles play, you can go on Game Time and get a deal while the game's even being played. So called it right here. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code BIRDS for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code BIRDS, BIRDS, for $20 off your tickets. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Hey, it's Jeff Mosher. I love the fall because football's back, but it's also my busiest season between work, kids going back to school, youth sports and activities. There's just not enough time, especially to make a good home-cooked meal. That's why I love HelloFresh. HelloFresh delivers farm-fresh food with pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes. 3, 2, 1. Hey, it's Jeff Mosher. I love the fall because football's back, but it's also my busiest season between work, kids going back to school, youth sports and activities. There's just not enough time, especially to make a good home-cooked meal. That's why I love HelloFresh. They deliver farm-fresh food with pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes right to my doorstep. No more wasting time at the grocery store because America's #1 meal kit helps make home cooking easy, efficient, and affordable. We don't waste time researching new recipes and planning meals. With HelloFresh, the shopping's already done. The perfect amount of ingredients arrive with step-by-step recipe cards. How efficient is that? Plus, HelloFresh saves you time and money. HelloFresh is 25% less expensive than takeout, so you'll get a home-cooked meal without digging deep into your wallet. Don't forget about taste and selection. HelloFresh makes food for meat lovers, seafood lovers, vegetarians, and those who love variety. My personal favorites are the spicy Creole stew and pecan-crusted trout, 2 dinners my whole family enjoyed, and we actually had time to sit down together and eat at the table. Go to HelloFresh.com/50Eagles and use the code 50Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/50Eagles. Use that code 50Eagles for 50% off plus free shipping. Act now for America's #1 meal kit.
And now we are going to move on to a preview of the San Francisco 49ers. Big physical team, Greg. Everybody talks about Purdy. Christian McCaffrey, one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the league. Brandon Ayuk, good receiver. Deebo Samuel, a little bit of a gadget guy. George Kittle, great tight end. Trent Williams is back. Offensive line. Fred Warner on defense. You just signed Chase Young. You got Bosa coming off the other edge. Give us your take when you put on the film.
Yeah,
what are they doing?
Let's start on offense. They're a very difficult offense to defend. First of all, they're different than most teams because they feature probably 40+% of their snaps, what we call 21 personnel. They're going to play with a fullback in normal down and distance situations with Kyle Juszczyk.
He's good,
number
too.
one.
Good fullback.
Really good player. And he's not a numbers guy. It's not as if he catches a lot of passes. It's not as if he runs the ball, but he's really important to what they do.
Smart player.
Yeah. And what they do, they motion as well and as much as any team in the league. And their motion, Clay, is more for the run game, not for the pass game. The Dolphins, on the other hand, when the Eagles played them a few weeks ago, their motion was more in the pass game. The 49ers use motion more in the run game. And Kittle and Juszczyk are key players in the motion element of their offense. And they often motion across the formation. And they try to mess with the gap integrity of the defense because you have to decide how you want to play that. Are you bumping over? What are you doing so you don't lose gap integrity in the run game? Because their run game is very good, and it's foundationally how they start their offense. The other thing Kyle Shanahan does, which is might be in today's football considered a little bit old school, but he sees the game as a lengthy process, not as a series of individual plays. So he wants to see with everything he does in the first couple of possessions how you're going to respond, and then he banks it. And he knows, hey, you've practiced all week to respond to this particular formation, and they're very diverse formationally at a 21 personnel. So here's how you've responded the first 3 times we showed you this formation. Now when you get to the third quarter, he knows exactly how you're going to respond, and he calls a play to defeat that. So he sees the game as a process, not as just a series of individual plays.
No, absolutely, Greg. And to piggyback, I think as a player, this when you have a fullback and a tight end like Kittle and Juszczyk, it's just such a big advantage because these guys are smart enough and they're talented enough to get moved around too. You can put these guys in different situations. So you come out 21 personnel, they might be in a spread look.
Correct.
These guys can line up in different situations, different spots. You think based off the personnel group, you're going to get a certain look, but these guys are talented and smart enough. It's like when I played with the New England Patriots. You had to know so much. Like Gronk was the Y, but if you were that H, if you were that fullback or that slot guy, Julian Edelman, Danny Amendola, you had James Devlin, you had to know so much from that position because they're going to call 21, but they're going to come out in a spread look. They're going to put you outside because it puts the defense in a bind now. Now you're going to have to tip your hat early if you're playing man-to-man. If you're playing zone, now you got a cornerback outside and you're wasting them on a fullback. And you got your inside receiver is running routes on a linebacker. They're really good about finding those mismatches. And they do got Juszczyk, who I love him. He's a smart guy, smart football player, physical dude. I used to play some fullback. I love watching this guy play. And Kittle's one of those tight ends that you can run to him or you can run away from him. A lot of times, Dalton Kincaid, you're playing last week. You're not going to run to Kincaid, the power, or you're going to either sift him backside or arc him to a safety. He's not. Now you got Kittle, who could probably block Hassan Reddick. He can hold up against Josh Sweat, and that's one of the reasons this run game is so effective. You got guys that can stay on the front side of plays like as a tight end. It opens things up. And then obviously, I think Deebo Samuel with the gadgets and Brandon Ayuk, as a pure receiver, and Purdy is doing a good job. But Trent Williams coming back is also big time for the offensive line.
See, it's interesting because, not to disagree with you, but I don't think the way they use Samuel in the context of what they do, I don't think that's a gadget. I think that with Samuel, they're running, ultimately, they run their base stuff. They just get to it in totally different ways. Like when you see him on orbit reverse motion, let's say, for them, that's not a gadget play because the play ends up just being either outside zone or a gap scheme. It's just how they get him the ball is different. Yeah. So it's the same basic stuff. And, as you mentioned, all 5 of their eligible receivers can line up anywhere in the formation. Yeah. We know that McCaffrey and Samuel are totally interchangeable in the way they're deployed within the context of their formations. This really sets up a fascinating matchup because one of the things I think Sean Desai has done exceptionally well is he's shown a lot of different looks. And obviously that takes great coaching, not only by him, but by the defensive coaching staff. So the question is, are you going to continue to show all these looks? Because you don't want to get caught. The last thing you want is to get caught with someone out of position. And I think it's worth mentioning Purdy. We talk about, so-called wow quarterbacks, and very often we talk about the Josh Allen types, the Patrick Mahomes types, the Jalen Hurts types, guys who make plays outside the structure, the off-schedule plays. But Purdy is a master at 2 things that he does at a really high level. Number 1, he's an unbelievable processor. When teams go with late rotation on him, in a second, he sees exactly what the new look is and knows exactly where to go with the ball. He does not get stuck in the pocket. And the other thing, his anticipation, I mean, this because you played with a guy, for a couple of years in Brady who was like this. But, I always tell people that if you were sitting with me and watching tape and I stopped it right as he separated his hands to throw the ball, you would say, who's he throwing it to? because guys haven't even come out of their breaks yet, and he's starting his delivery, and he's still putting the ball right on their hands. And that is a wow trait, even though most people don't see it that way because he's not running around.
Absolutely. And I think those are the hardest quarterbacks to guard. And that's why Purdy's been so successful. And some people are saying it's a system. And, I'm a guy that, hey, if it is
everybody has a system. That's the way it's taught.
Everybody
that, Clay.
has a system. He is doing his job, running the system, and doing a great job doing it. Before we get to a couple clips here, Greg, when you're watching this 49ers defense, obviously you're talking a physical defense with Fred Warner. Chase Young, I feel like, has made an immediate impact coming off the edge, and especially you're talking about Bosa too. What are you seeing from this defense? To me, the defensive backfield doesn't have any superstars right now. I don't think they're playing great, but they don't really have to.
Their front seven is phenomenal. Fred Warner's the best linebacker in the game. Dre Greenlaw is a really good player. We know what they have up front. I mean, when they go to their pass rush front, you have Bosa and Young on the outside, Hargrave and Armstead inside. That's a tough deal. The other thing they do really, really well, and it's tough, is they line up in what we call loaded fronts, where there's 3 defensive linemen to one side of the center. Very often Warner will walk up, mug up on the side opposite the load. It becomes a 5-man front, and they have all kinds of multiple stunts from that really make it a mental game as much as a physical game, and they do that extremely well, particularly on third down. Now, having said that, playing off your point, if you can protect, I think there's some opportunities. Ward is a nice corner. He predominantly plays left corner. He can make really good plays, but he's also beatable. A few weeks ago, they made a change. They brought Ambry Thomas, to play outside in their nickel, and they moved Diamador Lamore inside. That's their best trio of corners. But I think that if you can protect, I think there are opportunities. And now there's a rookie playing safety because Hufang is out for the year. And I really like Jair Brown coming out of Penn State. I loved his tape. I think he can be a good player, but he's a rookie. So, you have to figure that there's ways to attack him as well. So, but that front group, particularly the front 6 in nickel, is as good as there is in the NFL.
No, agreed. And I think, like you said, if you get it protected, which is big, you got to be able to protect. And then, defensively for the Eagles, you got to be able to stop the run, Christian McCaffrey, to have a chance to beat this team. So let's take a look at a couple of these clips here, Greg, before we say our goodbye.
Yeah, as you're setting that up, the one thing to keep in mind, too, is McCaffrey's a terrific receiver. And as you and I talk on a Tuesday night, we don't know what Cunningham's situation is for the Eagles. He left with a hamstring. Rarely do guys play the next week with a hamstring. So if they have to play backup linebackers and deal with McCaffrey, I'm not saying that's going to, they'll lose the game because of it, but that's just an issue you have to deal with.
Yep. All right. And right now we're just going back to the Eagles game for a couple of clips here before we get to the 49ers game. But this is, the Eagles are going to have a couple of tough receivers to stop. And this is a play here that you see Darius Slay, get beat by Stephon Diggs right here.
Oh, yeah. That was actually, I remember this play really well. This was a Josh Allen play, even though Slay got beat, because look at Allen in the pocket. Carter actually gets in and hits him, and he kind of bounces off. I mean, it was an unbelievable play by Josh Allen. You can see it from the end zone angle. If you go to the end zone angle, I believe Erratic won on the outside, and Carter got him, and Carter literally bounced off of Josh Allen. And that, if you run it here, you'll see that. Look at Carter. He's on the right side of the screen. He's going to win. And look, he hits him, and he literally bounces off.
He looked like he sprained his hand or something.
Allen's 6'5", 240. He's a big man.
Yeah, that's a big. And I think the very next play, you also have another reception. I think we got to watch Dalton Kincaid down here.
Yep.
And George Kittle is going to be a problem, Greg. I think.
Yeah.
Obviously Kincaid didn't have a huge game, but you got to guard George.
What's going to be interesting is what the Eagles do in the secondary as you're running these clips, because last week we had talked about the week prior how Slay played boundary and Bradbury played the field. In this game, they pretty much had Slay line up on the side of Diggs. Now, Diggs played in the slot a good amount, so it's not as if he matched him head-to-head on every snap, but they had Slay almost always line up on the side of Diggs. Now, occasionally they motion Diggs across the formation, and that changed that. But, they've got Ayuk and Samuel. Those are two really good receivers. So I'm very curious to see, and I don't know the answer to this, Clay, but I'm curious to see what the Eagles do.
Yeah, and then here's another catch right here.
This covered the cover 2 turkey shot, right?
Cover 2 hole shot. Yep.
Yeah. Allen kind of pumped to hold the safety to that side. It was Byard. He held him in the middle because they had an inside route, and then he threw the whole shot.
So they have some stuff to work on to clean up, in the passing game if you want to stop Brock Purdy and this 49ers offense. And we're going to look at one more clip here of
and pressure is going to be key. Allen's a different kind of cat because of his size and his movement. Purdy actually has good movement, but he's not 6'5", 240. But they couldn't get a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. They only had 1 sack, and it was by Graham later in the game. But they really didn't get consistent pressure on Josh Allen.
Yeah. And then here you see Christian McCaffrey. This is why this guy's so tough to stop.
Yeah, but go back for a sec. Look at the linebackers react to the orbit reverse action by Samuel. Look at the linebackers react. You see everybody move that way, and then all of a sudden they're in perfect position to get blocked.
They got to respect it because Samuel is such an explosive weapon, and you can see the blocking scheme.
You'll see it here. Look at 54 and 56. And Wagner's a great player. But look, that's all you need, and you get an angle on the block. One step in the NFL, Clay, you played. One step is all you need.
Absolutely. So this team offensively is going to be tough to stop because they are versatile in so many ways. And then obviously the very next play, you got another gadget move with.
And that's worked for them in the past. That play didn't work, but that's the kind of you have to be aware. They're really good with misdirection. They play with your eye discipline, particularly second-level defenders.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a number of plays where Bobby Wagner, who's a first-ballot Hall of Fame linebacker, Clay, where Bobby Wagner he's played in the league a long time, where he was uncertain exactly how to react, and then you get tentative and you stand there and you just don't react the way you need to react.
Yep. And then we're going to bounce back to the Eagles game one more time, and I'll show you guys some good stuff here.
This is the 17-yarder in overtime. They actually this exact play happened earlier in the game. It was 33 yards to Smith, and the coverage was exactly the same. It's actually, believe it or not, it's actually cover 4, but they're choosing to play it like it's man on Brown when he's on the numbers because they wanted to take away the inbreakers. So they play it like an undercut 2-man because they want to take away the inbreakers, but it's actually in the cover 4 family.
Yeah, and that was a huge play. And then there's just one more to get you guys out of here on to get you prepared for the 49ers game again. And,
I'm fascinated by this game, particularly with how many snaps a lot of these Eagles defenders played. I mean, I loved what Jordan Davis did this week, but he played 62 snaps. I bet his whole life he's never played 62 snaps before.
Here we go. Here's the 49ers defense we wanted to show you guys. I mean, you got to take care of this pass rush.
Yeah.
And you see what they're
that's just Bosa winning off the side. We assume Lane Johnson.
Yeah.
Bosa lines up on the other side as well. And Mailata's had some issues at times this year in one-on-one pass protection. But Chase Young, he's a load too.
Yep. So there you guys have it. Got you guys teed up, ready to go on some film. You know what to expect this week moving into the 49ers game. We talked about the Eagles' big win against the Bills, what they did well, what they need to improve on. And now 49ers coming in. They're underdogs at home, which I think is a little bit disrespectful. They're 10-1.
I agree.
NFL record-wise, MVP caliber quarterback, and they are 3-point underdogs at home. I like the Eagles' chances. If Lane Johnson's healthy, you block up this front seven, like you said, one of the best front sevens in football. You hold the offense in check with Christian McCaffrey. Stop the run game. The Eagles are so good at it. You don't have to worry about the quarterback running this week, and you take care of Debo and Ayuk. I like the Birds' chances.
That's a lot there you just said, though, Clay. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. But appreciate you guys for tuning in to another session of Inside the Tape brought to you by the Inside the Birds Podcast Network, and we will catch you guys next week. Fly, Eagles, fly.